Hello all. So this is a previous exam question that came up in 2016. So it's a very old one. I think that you might get it. And it runs back through all of the theories that we've done, but it's hard to sometimes access who the subcultural theorists. So it says assess subcultural. Subcultural is anyone who's talking about groups. Specifically mention subcultures, but it has to be group acts of crime or deviance subcultural. Right. Assess subcultural explanations. It says explanations, which tells me it is a usefulness question. So usefulness, and it has to be based on group. Also for an A, we need to be discussing both crime and deviance at different points throughout the essay. So the way I start these questions is I go straight to the oldest grid, so the blue functionalist grid. So always do it in the order I go, right, first grid, functionalism. Let me remember if anyone talks about group acts of crime or deviance. So Durkheim doesn't, neither does Hershey. Merton talks about crime, but he doesn't talk about subcultures or groups. He talks about individual people. Albert Cohen, on the other hand, does. So for functionalist, subcultural theories, functionalist subcultural theories are useful to understand crime and deviance. They actually help us understand both crime and deviance. For Albert Cohen, because I'm going to actually end up talking about all three Cohens. For Albert Cohen, working class groups when unable to achieve, so working class groups when unable to achieve consensus goals of status in education. Albert Cohen, working class groups when they're unable to achieve the consensus goals of status in education. So due to blocked opportunities. So when unable to achieve the consensus goals of status in education due to blocked opportunities. There is a reaction formation. Become aware. Leading to status frustration. So when unable to achieve the consensus goals of status in education due to blocked opportunities, there's a reaction formation, awareness, leading to status frustration and the creation of a subculture where status is awarded for deviant activities. Blocked opportunities, reaction formation, status frustration, and the creation of a subculture where status is awarded for deviant activities. Next sociologist in that grid is Cloud and Oland. Cloud and Oland are also talking about subcultures. For Cloud and Oland, all of the working class communities experience blocked opportunities from money and status. For Cloud and Onan, the whole working class community experience blocked opportunities from money and status. And have created an illegitimate career structure. Criminal, violent, and retreatist. For Cloud and Oland, all of the working class communities have experienced blocked opportunities from money and status. and have created an illegitimate career structure, like criminal, violent, and retreatist. Blocked opportunities also exist in these subcultures. So, those two. The third person in that grid is Miller. Now, Miller doesn't talk about blocked opportunities, but never mind. For Miller, deviance is linked to the culture of the lower working class. As they are socialized into focal concerns. Is linked to the culture of the low and working class as they're socialized into focal concerns. Trouble, e.g., trouble and excitement. And this means they are more likely to commit crime or deviant acts. 3 sociologists, all functionalists, all talking about the word subculture or groups. This shows. Must do this shows. This shows subcultural explanations. So this shows functionalist subcultural theory. So this shows functionalist subcultural explanations. Let's come back to the question. Are useful. Functionalist subcultural explanations are useful and can explain both material and non-material crime. They're useful. These explanations are useful in explaining both material and non-material crime, which is the result of working class groups being blocked, working class groups experiencing blocked opportunities from money and status. So they are useful explanations and can explain both material and non-material crime. In explaining both material and non-material crime, which is the result of working class groups experiencing blocked opportunities from both money and status. So useful is explains both material and non-material crime because of those blocked opportunities. However, and I'm just stealing Collinson from one of the evaluation boxes that seems to work really well. However, for Collinson, these subcultural functionalists fail to consider that masculinity is playing a part in the creation of these subcultures. They fail to consider that masculinity is playing a part in the creation of these subcultures. Being blocked from hegemonic masculinity can cause men to commit more crime than women. They don't really consider masculinity can be an element. Being blocked from hegemonic masculinity may cause men to commit more crime than women. Remember, there's no discussion of women here. You could use the male stream argument, but probably going to end up coming on to that a little bit later. So this shows, however, and obviously I've come back to functionalist subculturals, that's the question. That's paragraph 1. Paragraph 2, I then go to the second grid we did, which is Marxism. It's how I always approach these types of questions. Second grid we did was red and Marxism. in my brain, I skimmed through and I noticed that Marxist subcultural theories are really quite useful. So Marxist subcultural explanations, come back to the question, can explain deviance. Not so much crime. So, capitalism maintains control. Capitalism maintains control via an ideological state apparatus. Capitalism maintains control via ideological dominance. I've been teaching education today. Ideological dominance and economic pressures. The young are not locked into capitalism yet. Maintains control through ideological dominance and economic pressures. So the young are not locked into capitalism yet. For Hall and Jefferson, subcultures are a way to resist capitalism. With high unemployment, low wages, and inner city decline. For break, subcultures allow optimism, freedom, and experimentation, that things could change. I'm just taking these three from the subcultural Marxist section. They're very, very short. And for Phil Cohen, subcultures are a symbolic solution. They're a symbolic solution to diminished employment prospects and the decline of the traditional working class community. So those three. Hall and Jefferson, Brake, and Phil Cohen. So this shows, read the question. This shows subcultural explanations explain youth deviance. They explain youth deviance. This is because young working class groups are not locked into capitalism yet. It explains young acts of deviance because young working class groups are not locked into capitalism yet, so can resist with deviant subcultural acts. However, taking Mafi Sully, these subcultural theorists are dated. The new working class are actually pro-capitalism, and subcultures no longer exist. We now have neo-tribes based on shared interest. They're out of date. The new working class, remember from core, are pro-capitalism. And subcultures no longer actually exist. We now have neo-tribes. Right. The third is yellow, interactionism. Interactionist. Explanations. Let's check the question. Interactionist. Subcultural explanations. Also explain deviance and consider negotiation. So anyone who mentions groups. So Chambliss looked at the Saints and Roughnecks and found both subcultures committed the same amount of anti-social behaviour. The Saints, who are middle class, have cultural capital, and as a result can negotiate. Both commit the same amount of antisocial behaviour. The Saints have cultural capital and as a result can negotiate. The young, hippie marijuana use was initially a minor and insignificant act. It was initially only a minor and insignificant act. Over time, the police acted as amplifiers. Initially only a minor, insignificant act. But over time, I'm going to put due to police labelling. Due to police labelling, they acted as amplifiers. For Stan Cohen, media amplifies deviant subcultures with symbolization, exaggeration, and prediction. Media amplifies deviant subcultures with symbolization, exaggeration, and prediction. 3 sociologists. This shows interactionist subcultural explanations, this shows interactionist subcultural explanations are useful as they can explain or as they consider that all young groups, they're useful as they consider that all young groups engage in deviant acts and subcultures. They consider that all young groups engage in deviant acts or subcultures. But it is negotiation. But it's negotiation that means middle class groups. But it's negotiation that means middle class groups are not seen. But it's negotiation that means middle class groups are not seen as deviant or criminal. It's negotiation. Everyone does it. Middle class subcultural capital, they can negotiate, which means we don't see them as deviant or criminal. However, I'm going to take this from the Becker evaluation because it's true of these sociologists too. However, for Goldner, these explanations are distracting attention away from real, serious crime. These explanations are distracting attention away from real, serious crime and therefore focus too much on deviance and not on crime, and fail to offer an explanation for criminal acts. They never explain the initial act, it's only ever the reaction, and it's only ever low-level deviance, which is not good. Okay, 4 paragraphs. Right, the next colour is... No, sorry, it's 3 paragraphs. The 4th paragraph is right realism, very dark blue, this one. Always follow the order of the grids and see if I can find sociologists on them. So more darker. Right realism. For right realism, and the underclass are a subculture. For right realism, they offer an explanation for crime. Right realists offer an explanation for crime. I spent quite a lot of time on deviance. For Murray, the underclass are a deviant subculture. For Murray, the underclass are a deviant subculture, and a key factor behind the rise in crime. The underclass are a deviant subculture, and a key factor behind the rise in crime. They have a counter culture. Marriage is separate from childbearing. They have a counterculture. Marriage is separate from childbearing. Acquiring money is separate from work. And men prove masculinity through violence. All Murray. Underclass, deviant subculture, and a key factor behind the rise in crime. They have a counterculture. Marriage is separate from childbearing. Acquiring money is separate from work, and men prove masculinity through violence. For Farrington and West, really short, there's a correlation between poor parenting and offending. That's all they say, really short. There's a correlation between poor parenting and offending. So I only find 2 sociologists. If you can find a third that's similar, please feel free to add them in and let me know. This shows subcultural explanations of crime. This shows right realism, subcultural explanations of crime are useful. The subcultural explanations of crime are useful. They can explain a rise in crime during the 1980s. They're useful as they can explain a rise in crime during the 1980s. This is because rise in crime during the 1980s. This is because crime is not the result of poverty. This is because crime is not the result of poverty, but, to their view, inadequate socialization but inadequate socialization, and an over-generous welfare state. I'm putting that in bracket, in commas, because not my words. Over-generous welfare state. They're useful as they can explain a rise in crime in the 1980s. This is because crime is not the result of poverty, but inadequate socialization or an over-generous welfare state. However, Jones, this is the tweet I sent Charles Murray. However, Jones notes that these subcultural explanations are not based on any facts. These subcultural are not based on any facts and can't explain crime. And they can't explain crime. 20 million claim from the welfare state. 20 million claim from the welfare state in the UK. Half are people drawing their state pensions. And of the remaining 10 million, 9.2 million work. They're not based on any facts and they can't explain crime. 20 million claim from the welfare state in the UK. Half are people drawing their state pension. And of the remaining 10 million, 9.2 work. Murray's theory is incorrect. Most people work. The issue is the working poor. Literally, his theory relates to the smallest margin of groups and therefore cannot explain a crime at all. So, 4 paragraphs. You could probably do left realism if you had time, so just a tiny bit on orange. I'm going to just show you the introduction. So, introduction, subcultural explanations are useful. This is our introduction. Subcultural explanations are useful. They can explain material crime, non-material crime, deviance from young groups, and amplification and negotiation. Then a little summary. Look, they explain material crime, non-material crime, deviance from the young, amplification and negotiation. That's why it's good to plan the paragraphs, then do the intro. They look at blocked opportunities and with left realism, consider ethnicity and crime. They look at blocked opportunities and with left realism, consider ethnicity and crime. However, they are overwhelmingly mainstream. Gender is ignored, and women too experience blocked opportunities. Women too experience blocked opportunities. But this, so overwhelmingly mainstream, gender is ignored, and women too experience blocked opportunities. And therefore, this theory disappoints when we consider feminism and gender. It does. Gender's still ignored. Okay, ethnicity is touched on by left realism. If you didn't get a chance, you could still pop it in, just so you know. Conclusion. Subcultural explanations. This is my judgment now, without saying I. Subcultural explanations are very useful. They do explain crime, violent, material, drug, and low-level deviance from young men. Ethnicity is touched on, although briefly, but it's so disappointing that gender and women's what appears lack of crime is not explained. Women only commit about 80% of crime as male. Ethnicity is touched on, although it's very brief. But it's so disappointing that gender and women, what appears to be lack of crime, is not explained. The male stream criticism, sadly, is still true. That's my view. I think it's cracking to just take the subcultural sections. It seems really useful. It seems to me all crime is explained. A tiny bit of ethnicity touched on. Again, if you had time, you'd just do a tiny bit of left realism. You could put left realism here if you wanted to, actually, although they would, two cats, different sides, would kill each other, those two, right realism and left realism. But I think it's really important to show you an introduction and conclusion. You outline what's good and you outline where the criticisms are. And then in the conclusion, how useful is it? What is explained? What's considered? Okay. I do think subcultural explanations might be likely in your exam. I really, really do. It hasn't come up for a long time. So please make sure you're really clear on this. You understand. And if you, as always, have any questions, please let me know.